Hey y'all. um, so I would just say have everyone introduce themselves before we get started, and just have a conversation. So Donnell, you want to start, man? Who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm Donnell Alexander, and I'm a nonfiction storyteller. Sometimes, mostly, I'm doing print, but sometimes I do podcast and some films. You don't want me to keep going, do you?
I don't know. Another second or so.
Yeah. I live in downtown LA. That's something. And yeah, and I'm a Pasadena person. My kids grew up there.
Okay. And you also have a site that a podcast about weed.
Yeah. Well, until last year, I was a co-host of the Weed Week podcast and the Weed Week newsletter. It's kind of an industry thing, but really popular inside cannabis, and definitely one of the most important work things I've done recently. Opened a whole new world.
Cool. All right. Someone else? Who else? Let's jump right in.
I'm Lisa Teasley, and I'm the author of two novels, Dive and Heat Signature, and a story collection, Glow in the Dark, and an editor at large at Los Angeles Review of Books. So that's it. Yeah. Born and raised in LA.
Keenan, you want to say anything?
Yeah. So I'm Keenan Norris. I'm also the author of two novels, Brother the Dancer, and The Confession of Copeland Kane, which will be published this June 15th, so in a couple weeks from now. I also published some nonfiction in places like the LA Review of Books, Alta Literary Journal, and elsewhere.
Cool. Kia?
My name's Kia Penso. I'm a writer. I support my writing habit working for large multinational organizations and as an editor. I write about the Caribbean. I write about, right now I write about the Caribbean, the afterlife, the use of myth in sense making, I guess is one way I would describe what I write about. And I write about my relatives. I'm Jamaican. As a detail, it's an important detail.
And Rachel, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? Hello, did we freeze? So, hello.
Okay, my name is Rachel Harper, and I am primarily a novelist. I also write scripts, and I have 3 novels. The third one is actually going to come out next March, 2022, called The Other Mother. And I also teach at Spalding University's MFA in Writing program.
Awesome.
And I'm a Pasadena person. I live in Altadena, but I've been in Pasadena for a long time and raised my kids here as well.
Yeah. And I'm Jervey Tervalon, and I'm a novelist and write other kinds of things too. And I guess the whole idea behind the panel was that sometimes it just seems that when you're a writer of color, particularly a Black writer, at times it just seems like there's some disconnect between the publishing industry and us. So we're kind of addressing those issues today. And I'm sorry, my daughter just came in the room. Colette, shut the door, please. Thank you. So I really thought that somebody was going to handle that. All right. So one of the things that if it wasn't for the fact that I had an African American editor, Tracy Sherrard, that was at HarperCollins, and now she runs Amistad Books. I published like 4 novels with her, I think, and I had one white editor. But I think if I wouldn't have had that African American editor, I would have probably published 1 book, and that would have been it. There's another instance I remember getting some advice from an agent, a pretty well-known agent. She was so condescending. She was so incredibly loathsome, and essentially, I think she was trying to destroy me by making me feel as though I couldn't write about anything I wanted to write. So I said to her, I would prefer never to write again than to do anything you suggest. And I would run into her at cocktail parties. So that was one of those awkward moments in life. So anyway, I'm just wondering, how does that work for you guys? I mean, what have you felt sometimes when you're trying to deal with the industry that it feels as though we're just at a disadvantage, or it really isn't a hindrance?
Jervey, if I may, I was thinking, because I want to make sure that I'm clear that I'm very grateful to be able to have a long career as a writer. I'm a guy who graduated from high school with a 1.45 grade point average, small town Ohio. So all the people I've got to meet and the stories I've gotten to tell, I'm very happy to have done it. Having said that, I'm someone who realizes that my career persists at the pleasure of white people, and that it also exists at the limits of their imaginations, And I, like you, I was lucky enough with my first 2 books to have Black editors. And in my newspapers, magazines, website life, I'm thinking of I've written thousands of articles for hundreds of sites. And in this room today are a third of my editors. Hello, Lisa Teasley. A third of my Black editors are in this room this night, and that's important. We can talk more about it later, but yeah, just to affirm what you're talking about I think it's specifically different than people of color when you're writing about the Black American experience, and especially from my perspective as someone who deals in nonfiction.
Yeah, that's very clarifying. Yeah. So somebody else want to jump in?
Well, I was going to say that when starting out in the late '80s, and I had a fancy who. That's you too, Jervey?
Yeah, I thought I turned my phone off, and my daughter managed to call me. I mean, it's amazing.
And I had been publishing in literary, small literary journals before that. But when we went out with my first novel, across the board, all of the editors at the houses said, "What do we do with a Black female writer who isn't writing stereotypical characters? There are characters of other races and cultures. What do we do with this?" And they literally said these things like they're not in the ghetto necessarily. It was language like that in the rejection letters. And so all that time, I didn't get a book deal from between the years of '89 until 2000, when Zadie Smith's White Teeth came out. Then I made sense, as a Black female literary fiction writer. But that said, I have to say there are always exceptions to the rule. And so Karen Rinaldi, who was then at Bloomsbury around 2001, 2002, she had been a longtime champion, but she wasn't able to, the years before that, before she was heading Bloomsbury, she wasn't able to buy, my first couple of books. And it was a small press in Seattle called Kuhn Press that published my short stories in 2000. And then Bloomsbury bought the paperback rights. But it was a long time, it felt like a long time at that time. Then I just, calmed down with the frustration and just, I just kind of shrugged my shoulders at, whoever doesn't understand me. Because, it's kind of almost not my business who doesn't understand me.
I remember I was on some plane ride, something I had to do, and I had a copy of Zitherfa, and I was reading it, and I came across a story, and I was like, this is really a good fucking story. And then I realized you had written it. I finished reading the story, and I realized you had written it. So it was one of those kind of cool moments. Who's next? Who wants to talk?
Sure, I'll talk. I mean, I think one thing that's been interesting to observe in the last year, and I'm, interested also in what other people think about it, is, with 2020, the murder of George Floyd, the murder of Breonna Taylor, on and on, this kind of mainstream America getting religion around Black people, and this sort of, this push for, content that's, almost all focused, exclusively around acts of, racism and so forth. And what people, think about that, because it I've found definitely in the last 10 months or whatever, that, that this change that we've seen from like corporate America, right? And even within the publishing industry has, been, it's a trip. That's all I can say. Cause, like my whole life, we were not that popular to put it bluntly, like we weren't popular. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm thinking through how to, how to take this sudden shift that is really brought about by the lynching of a black man in the street in broad daylight, right? And what that all means. So.
Yeah, it's a lot to try to struggle with. Rachel, Kia, what do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I have had an interesting. Oh, do you go ahead, Kia?
No, go on.
I have had an interesting sort of last 15 years in the business too. And like Lisa, when my first book came out, which was in like 2006, there was a lot of talk with my team in terms of publicity. It was a bigger house, but a smaller sort of house within the house, and it was and it.
I'm getting a glitch.
All the stories I wanted to tell, and I kind of got that sinking early on of like, oh boy, this is how are they going to do it? Because yes, like Jervey saying, I want to write the stories I want to write, and I don't want to write if I can't tell stories from my community and my people. But then that idea right away of like, how much support are you going to get from the publishing houses? And how are they going to sort of publicize or spin your work? And it was interesting last summer because I had a manuscript, Black family story. And when we were ready to go out with it, just coincidentally, it was like July. And my agent was like, well, we've had all these meetings with editors. Everybody's sort of talking about, like Keenan is saying, people are trying to stand behind their words in publishing as well. And then, as the story went, what I found was I had several editors interested, some white, some of color, but not, and some Black. And what ended up happening in this story is that it seemed like the first line of defense, like the editor that my agent sent to, was open and interested in telling diverse stories. And then when it came to them having to pitch to their larger editorial board or their bosses, who I came to understand were a lot of white people, it all, like, sort of interest and everything disappears, and it's that like disappointment of the kind of that first editor being the gatekeeper but being excited, and then can they get support at the house? And I'm sure a lot of people have those stories. That was a recent story where, we had a lot of enthusiasm.
You're still there, Rachel? I guess she froze. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Kia, Kia and I were contemporaries at UCSB, and we took the same writing courses. And she started writing about Jamaica, and I just became tremendous. It kind of made me become obsessed with Jamaica, and she's just written amazing stuff about growing up there, and so it's like someone like you. Go ahead.
I have more recent experiences.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm not denying that. You're still alive.
No. I thought we could just mention those though, because they're sort of more There's things. So
I just was complimenting that you're the kind of person whose book should be out. I mean, your work should be.
no, I know, but I just was sort of trying to help you with more current experience.
Yeah, well, sure. Go ahead, take the floor.
So this is the extent of my experience with like literary marketplace. Absolutely zero. Years ago, I was running but I managed two newspapers. I managed two small newspapers. One was run by a crook. The other one was run by a crook. And the second newspaper had a circulation of about 150, and I brought it up to 300 before the crook and I became irreconcilably fallen out. I really didn't like doing business with a crook. So while I was living in Nevis, which has a population of 10,000, I became friends with a 78-year-old English aristocrat whose father had been an aide-de-camp to the Viceroy of India and who used to play polo with Prince Philip. And he kind of fell in love with me. And he used to read my journalism faithfully. And he said, and he was really connected. When they had a hurricane, this guy could call like Seagram's Corporation and say, can you send us a truckload of apple juice for the babies? And the truckload would arrive. And he said, I have a lot of connections in publishing and I can boost your career. And I turned him down because it was like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. But he was a really good man. He was very funny. He's dead now. That's why I can tell you this story. So I guess I haven't, been terribly serious about marketing myself because I don't really feel lucky at these kind of games, so I don't play them. What I do is I keep going, well, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? What am I doing this for? And I keep I write pretty much to answer the question of why I write. That's my experience with the marketplace. I sell stuff, but almost everything that I've sold and published is because somebody has had some need of it and come and asked me specifically for something. I don't know how to play that game. Let me tell you, every single game like that I've ever played in life, my results have been shit. So I don't do it. Like this whole thing of like second guessing editors and figuring out where they're at and how I fit. Like, I'm like, well, I know how that works. I don't fit. That's it. And it's not because I'm something special. It's because I'm like, I don't know how to give people what they want. I only know how to give people what I can do. So I have what I have. Now that's like on the side of like my money work, right? And I do my money work so I can write what I want to write. And I was like the person who sat outside the IMF every morning for like 4 years, rain, snow, smoking 2 cigarettes and drinking a cup of coffee and writing in a notebook, like 3 times a day. And I just, if I get a client right now that says, can you write a bunch of summaries of these reports on, labor markets in Azerbaijan, I can be like, yeah, I can do that. But, that's something you do with one hand tied behind your back in your sleeve. You know what I mean? You're not really asked to be creative when you do that. Creative is a kind of a weird thing. And like one of my whole things has been like, well, what is this activity for? It's a big question for me. It's a big question. So anyway, I'll shut up now.
Rachel, you got cut off. Do you want to go ahead and finish what you were
Zoom?
Yeah.
How far was I in? Because I feel like it took me a minute to realize that you guys were all then frozen. I was trying to make the point about last summer and the editors of color, particularly Black editors that were interested in my manuscript, were the first threshold, and there was a lot of enthusiasm. So we were hoping that what people had been saying to my agent after what was happening last summer, starting in June, July, August, but then the powers at the houses, the publishing houses above them, had to get on board. And that's why I saw the breakdown. And so I kind of noticed the difference of like 15 years ago with my first novel, when I think there was like one Black editor that, that passed. And there was like nobody else in the room that we were talking to. This time, it was like, okay, that's changed. That's great. There's a lot more Black editors that we can send to. But then we still ended up having the struggle of that they couldn't get enough support behind them at their houses, and seeing that breakdown and sort of realizing, okay, there's like another thing that we have to change. And I know that's been an ongoing conversation in publishing, for a while now. And that could be in general, it could be about my work again, being sort of considered very like literary, and often having a lot of, like this novel is a Black family story. But I often have a lot of, different mixed race things happening. And so it's not like traditionally sort of pitched as Black. And this time it's like, this is a Black story, it's a Black family, and yet we still kind of had these obstacles.
Yeah, I find it, can I say this? I find that interesting because one of the issues is, for me at least, with editors in 2021 especially, is that they're trying to find what Black people are thinking. And you need, I never aimed to be a mean Negro, so I don't really know. If you're trying to reach the average person, I think that there's been a lot of implying average thought and generalization. But I just wanted to piggyback on something Keenan said in terms of this new value in 2021 or post George Floyd. But I had an editor earlier this year. We had a disagreement about how the piece would end. And I told her, we could do your version, or we could do the version I have where at the end, Black people go, and they're shaking their head at it. And we could do yours, or we could do that one. And they took mine, in fact, because there was a level of trust and a desire to reach that audience. And it was a trending piece, so it worked out pretty well. I think that's how you make these little incremental changes of power as a writer dealing with editors, little ways.
They aren't only incremental, they're big. They're like big, they look like small incremental changes, but they're big imaginative leaps, how they play out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they change the temperature of the water, as it were. So I don't know, the question that you raise is like, who are you writing for? That's a big one, I think. I mean, and it's interesting to me because to some extent, everybody is like, well, their work is answering a question like that. Where is this pointed to? Where is this?
Well, the general understanding is if you're writing someplace where you're aiming to get, a living wage, that you're going to be writing for a white audience. And that's kind of the conundrum. Earlier this year, a famous Black guy tried to peel me away from what I was doing by using that question. When do you get to write for Black people? And he almost got me into this situation that would have been really problematic because I don't. Generally, the venues where I'm getting money, the Black readership is a minority, and that's a tough thing to contend with.
Well, I guess this is so challenging, to say the least.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
But okay. So just because this is an interesting question to me. I mean, I'm trying to sort of compare this to Caribbean experience and of writing, and especially because Caribbean literariness is all vernacular. It's like the most important sort of literary Caribbean products are vernacular. There's like whole like genres of music that you don't even like hear about here. Like, like all down the Eastern Caribbean, there are like these big songwriting competitions every year. There's people that live in little villages You will never hear of those people, you know, but come festival or carnival or whatever, this person is the king. And he's known on 6 islands and people there never forget. So, I mean, there's like, and one of the weirdest things that's happened is there are in the UK, there's a whole Caribbean culture of writing and drama production, of playwriting and producing vernacular theater. And one of the things, there's an actor who's involved in this, who's become a writer. Who's like, she's not a very good writer, but she's good at the stuff she produces, good enough to get on the stage and draws these huge audiences that actually keep a theater open. This popular stuff, like the slackness plays, as they're called, and that stuff keeps the theater open for the more serious playwrights. So basically, what's happened is like the kind of high-end literary stuff is now supported by the stuff that everybody else is, that the literary people are embarrassed about. The snobby people are embarrassed about. So like, there's just all these weird sort of possible organic connections you can have. And it, to me, the question is like, okay, well, where would you do, well, how does that grow? How do you grow that? How do you grow those kinds of connections? How do you grow those new paths into, let's say, that white market, taking this stuff with you?
Rachel, do you want to jump in here at all?
I think she's frozen.
She's frozen again.
Well, I guess maybe we should sort of segue into these moments that, like the kind of ridiculous moments where you realize something monumentous has happened. For me, is when I was at in a literary life. I was at, and I'm not talking about myself. It's just that I was at LitFest. I was at Squaw Valley Writers Conference, and there was this very beautiful woman that I introduced myself to very pleasantly, and her was Chimamanda Adichie. So I said, and it also shows you how the weird interconnection can be very fruitful in the sense that something that you didn't think could possibly happen, you were connected to something, sort of startling. So anyway, she asked me what I had written or something. And I said, yeah, I got a couple of books. And I said, what are you doing? She handed me this manuscript. So I took the manuscript back to my room, and I kind of read it really quickly. And when I saw her again, I said, you're the most talented writer at this writers conference. and so that was it. I didn't, she left, I went home, and I was on the board of Penn, and they were looking for people to submit to the Penn Writers Award for the West Coast. And we had no one. It was Penn Center, New York or something, was sponsoring this competition where you would have you would win a prize, and your book would be read by somebody like J.M. Kotazi, or I can't pronounce his name correctly. Anyway, so I suggested we send her book, and so she sent the book, and she won the award. And so I felt really good that I was sort of like indirectly instrumental in her having this tremendous opportunity to be read by this guy. And the sad thing is, when I asked her for a blurb for my next book, she turned it down. So, no good deed goes unpunished. So anyway, anyone else want to interject something about the literary life, and the things that we confront?
I mean, just to your story, Jervey, that's one hell of a story in it. But I think it speaks to.
You can see my blurb. Her blurb is on her book, her first book, first edition. So I didn't make it up. Go ahead. I'm sorry. It's true. I didn't make it up.
Oh God.
Yeah, no. But what I wanted to say was that point of the need for us to support each other more, and to not like backslide on that, because like we can kind of talk about other folks, as much as we want, but there's also some, because there are so few, especially like Black editors, Black agents, literary agents, and so forth. Where there is like, it's not that, obviously, people need to support good work, no matter what the race of the writer, but within that, like, okay, showing up, right, is important. And so it's just something that comes to mind in terms of like absurd stories. It just, I'm just remembering my first agent, who is no longer my agent and hasn't been my agent for 15 years or something, asking me after, like, she decided to represent my manuscript, if I also rapped. I was like,
what?
Do you think I do?
Rap? Oh, rap.
She asked me if I was a rapper too. I was like, yeah, rap. Yeah. No.
Wow.
Oops.
What is that?
This is like a nightmare
I
game.
write
It's like a murder mystery.
Yeah.
Almost as though we didn't do a tech check.
He's back.
Yeah. But
So
You thought I was
anyway,
dead, didn't you?
yeah, I'm back. Yeah.
what happened when we
I just
died?
sent a pencil
No,
right by my
but
head.
yeah, that's what she asked me.
And how did you respond?
How did you respond?
Oh, no, but I mean, it was just like, no, I told her no. Yeah, can y'all hear me? Yeah, I mean, it's just like, yeah, I mean, that's why I'm writing
I had
books
missed
so I
what
can
she
make
asked.
albums. Like, I mean, what the?
Spitting
Oh,
fire.
she asked me if I was a rapper.
Oh,
Oh God, that's so
Yeah.
lame.
oh,
Did
So
you
lame.
write that, Keenan? Did you
Mm-mm.
write that essay to sell somewhere? That's an amazing story. That's great.
yeah.
Well, I just,
Yeah, not yet.
just remember back in my academic days, I'd been teaching 17th century and 17th and 18th century English poetry for 10 years. It's like my specialty. I published a book on Wallace Stevens, and I was coming to the end of my tenure teaching at the College of Creative Studies, and the then provost, whose name will not be mentioned here, suggested that I might be more at home in the Black Studies department. This was his genius plan. Because of course, right? Like I hadn't actually studied Black studies. Like apparently it was just a place where you went to be Black.
I have something without turning this into the done wrong section of the festival.
I get a T-shirt that says that. Done wrong. Yeah.
I did this. I applied for a job. I got the job, but I applied for this job for a film organization about 10 years ago as an editor. And when I went to my audition, I was instantly and accidentally sent to audition for a slave movie.
Oh,
they thought I was there to audition for the slave movie, and I was kind of flattered because I didn't think I was in slave condition at that point.
well, yeah, but you're photogenic though.
I listen. That was like a harbinger of how that job was going to go. Just in the environment, and it's a whole story about how that job went. But I feel like part of the conversation we're having is about like this turning over of interest in us, so that we're more marketable. And I'm curious to know how people are interested in exploring that in the coming years. The projects that they're working on right now, even.
Gary Phillips and I had this idea of interviewing, Black writers of a generation older than us, and I can't think of his name, but he worked. I guess he was the editor of Players magazine, and Wanda Coleman was the.
You have to explain Players for the record.
Okay, well, Players was the Black Playboy, and the backstory of Players was absolutely insane. And one of the things that makes me most excited about somebody one day developing this into a project is Wanda Coleman became an editor there. Yeah. And the two guys that ran the place, one was a Jewish gangster, and the other guy was this really angry Black dude, and they both had guns.
This is like a Richard Pryor sketch.
It's like a Richard Pryor, but it's real. And I mean, everything that went on there, he said they almost came to shootouts in the stuff, and then they would make these women pose in these horrible, grotesque fashions, and for some reason the photographer was just evil, And Wanda Coleman said, "You cannot ask any of these women to pose in a position that you can't do yourself." And I was like, "Fuck, it's just, why hasn't this been made?" Because Wanda Coleman is one of my heroes, and it just would have been, it should happen one day. Wanda Coleman.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it needs to be made. Needs to be made. That's a story to tell.
Yes.
There's also, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm so grateful to Wanda because she used to take me on gigs with her, like to Cal State Long Beach or to different clubs, that kind of, warm up the audience with my poetry. And then she comes on and it was just like, I miss her so much.
Hey, Lisa, I was wondering, could you maybe explain to people who Wanda was? Because I don't think most people really know who she was.
Wanda Coleman was the most amazing poet. She was an LA treasure and an American treasure of poetry. And everyone should look her up. Whoever's watching, look up Wanda Coleman, Wanda Coleman, Coleman. Just
wasn't her
breathtaking.
What's that, the Mad Dog Black Lady?
Mad Dog Black Lady. That's what I was thinking. It's such a brilliant title.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was just, yeah. No, it was brilliant. Very, yeah.
Well, one day, Gary, I'll tell you guys the story since everyone's dead. Gary Phillips and I and a few other writers were at the LA Times Book Festival, and Wanda Coleman and what's her name? She just died. She's a very famous African-American poet. Everybody loved her. She hung out with really famous people. With Oprah's favorite poet.
Maya.
Yeah, Maya. So anyway,
not that recently. Yeah.
Yeah. So they had this.
Yeah.
And Wanda Coleman said publicly, she wrote somewhere that Maya Angelou hadn't done some of the things she had done. And she presented the argument. So anyway, what happened was there was this magazine that we're all in to support this organization of older Black writers. And so we were all blackballed and we all donated our work to this. So it was like weird. Suddenly the thing was defunded and it was awful. It was really bad blood. So anyway, we're at the LA Times Book Festival going to some event to do a talk, and Maya, and they tried to arrange the entire thing to make sure that we didn't come in contact with Maya Angelou. So we're in the cart with Wanda Coleman and we're driving along, and then there was Wanda Coleman. Maya Angelou in her golf cart, and she pointed at our golf cart with her 3-prong walker and cut us off. And then she waved at Wanda Coleman and told her to come to her car. And then we're all, Gary and I swear to God, Gary and I were looking at each other thinking, is she going to strike her with the walker? Because it would look pretty ominous, and it was some bad blood. And she sat there and they talked for a long time. And then she got back in the car, Wanda got back in, and Maya waved and rode away. And then we started on. So we said, "What happened?" She said, "Oh, it was all right. She didn't know who I was." So it was like one of those amazing moments where you feel like you're like witnessing history created in front of you. Okay, now I'm going to be sued. Anyone else have something to interject? More memories?
Well, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I wanted to tell a story just because I did this story for it ended up in the Guardian of London, and I guess the thing I'm talking about today is relationships with editors. And I had a good editor, in the process. It's a story about Black farmers, and I went up to Portland for it last year. And, I didn't know there was going to be quarantine, so it took like 3 months to get up to do the reporting and 4 months to get finished. Really good editor. But with each draft, the thing happens where, you're trying to make it more sellable to these organizations or to these, the big publications, and you lose a lot of yourself. That's just how the game works. That's just how the medium system works. But I had this sentence that I really wanted to have in there because you all know who Paul Mooney is, the comedian.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Mooney. He had a line on his album Race. I'm going to read the note. He says, he was talking about like, this is pre-23andMe ideas about racial purity. And he said, they just look at their family tree, white people. They just look at it because if they shake it, a nigga fall out. And I always loved that joke, and I always wanted to adjust, what's the word? Adapt that joke. And so for this article about Black farmers, I wrote, if you shake a Black family tree, a farmer's bound to fall out of it, right? But the piece goes over to London, and it turned over to if you shake an African-American family tree, a farmer is bound to fall out of it. And I have to say that's like 30% less funny to me than just the things and words. But because it's easy to turn these sessions into, crap harping about things. I feel very lucky that I even get to try to do homage, in journalism. So.
But over there, it's because Black people are Caribbean.
Yeah, I know.
Or African.
It was a factual correction, not an oral correction.
Yeah, and then you lose the note. I get it.
Exactly. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was Emery Holmes, who was the editor at Players.
I did
that story.
Wow.
And I recorded it. I have it recorded, so you can hear it if you want to hear it.
Mm.
We never did anything with it. Gary and I were too lazy to actually take the next step and get all the stuff transcribed and published. So,
well, I mean, it isn't all about the market. I mean, it's like you're doing it and you're sort of defining, it's also about making something.
Yeah. You paint and Lisa paints, so sometimes we paint different things. I mean,
Well, yeah, but no, I'm getting to that because like the market doesn't make this problem go away. Like no. We could all be like coasting on our fat residuals right now, but we would still have the problem. What are we making and why, and to what end, and what would you do with that complete freedom if you had it? What would you do with it?
Be true. Yeah.
What, Lisa? I couldn't hear you. What?
I said, to thine own self be true. I'm still going for that,
Yeah, no. There's less conflict. I think I don't want to make it seem like I'm suggesting there's this huge conflict and everybody's a sellout. Everybody deals with this in one way or another, right? And that every time the last couple of things I've published, they've been essays, and I've had to fight for points in them that I wanted to keep, and then I had to give way on some. And on some of the points where I gave way, it was better, and on some of the points where I gave way, it was worse. Right. But I think to myself, when I'm doing this is a little piece of something, of a whole. Right? That's why I can work these deals. But like, where am I traveling with this? Do I have like a vision of where I'm going? Or is everything contingent now?
Yeah. Rachel, do you have anything to say or?
Yeah, I have a lot to say. I'm having these internet problems. I'm so sorry. I've just tried to sort of keep up and, I heard the players, some of that comment. I've heard bits and pieces, but one thing I have to say is in terms of Kia's question about, why we're writing and what are we going to do with it, I am always aware of that and grateful to, the ancestors and the folks who came before us paving that way, and my children, my daughters, my stepson, young folks coming up and having different models of how to be in the world, how to be, in their case, Black Americans, and how to be decent people, how to be literate people, and keep their sanity and their humanity in a very challenging time, globally, but as far as Americans and people of color, and particularly Black Americans right now. And so I do think about what we're leaving behind and sort of the legacy and putting it down, in words on paper, and continually trying to define Blackness for each of us, and for all of us, and letting us define it, and continue to refine it and sort of tell our stories and let it be broad, multi-dimensional, stories like the people and cultures that we are. And so I come to that all the time, and that keeps me going in moments like this last year for all of us, that are so challenging, just as a human being, and also so, I try to keep that alive as what I want to be behind and what I want to give my kids and other young people as models of, how to be in the world.
Yeah, wonderfully said. I always feel like that I managed to get away with this life, and every good thing in my life has come from wanting to write and read. I wouldn't have kids. I wouldn't have a dog. I wouldn't, I just wouldn't have anything. I would just be an unhappy person weighing 400 pounds, teaching junior high. So it worked out. I was being amusing.
He doesn't actually weigh 400 pounds.
Any other final comments? We're running out. We got like 2 or 3 minutes. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, it's like if it wasn't for writing, I wouldn't know you guys. I wouldn't know. I mean, my closest friends are from the community, huh?
Yep.
Exactly. Yep. I agree. Yes.
Yeah. It's a weird life.
Blessed. I feel blessed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to
with you all, and yeah.
Huh?
No, I just said I feel blessed. Like it's a blessed life.
Yeah.
With all the the glitches and the problems and the challenges, but just like you said, we wouldn't know each other, and I feel like life is rich. For who crosses your path.
Keenan, did you want to try to say something? God, the technology.
Yeah, just that. I think that there's. Yeah. Oh, I'll just speak and see what happens. So yeah, I mean, I just want to say as well that I do think new things are being in terms of the publishing industry. Los Angeles is somewhat on the forefront with LARP, with Unnamed Press, with in California in general, and that there's a way that a lot of the old guard kind of gatekeepers in New York don't necessarily have to govern what we're doing out here, and would be really good if all these, institutions, local and national, had more folks like Lisa who are, working as editors as well as writers. And so,
yeah, I think that's right. And I think we got 1 minute left or something. They're going to 2 minutes.
Right.
Okay.
1 minute.
Anybody? Yeah, we got, take 10 seconds. Go ahead.
For me?
Yeah, anybody want to say a few closing words? It's been great. It's been a wonderful afternoon, and really enjoyed the conversation.
Me too.
I think I'm like you all in that I feel privileged to do it. I'm curious to see where these new directions are going.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
Well, we'll just do it again next year too. Live. We'll do it live next year. I mean, we're live now, but I mean, in person.
In person.
Yeah. We'll be back in our bodies. So they haven't beeped us off yet.
No, we still got a minute.
We still got a minute? Okay.
But it's been fun.
It's been hilarious. I mean, it's great. I mean, sorry. It's been very serious and, very well thought out.
Does anyone want to say any one thing that they're working on that you might want to mention to the audience? Anything interesting you guys are doing?
I write a memoir, in vignettes. That's what I'm doing, a vignette memoir. So
now that I want to read. That sounds great.
Yeah.
I have a collection of essays on Oedipus, Jane Austen, Jean Rhys, my relatives, ghosts, and touching on magic, and also just like some down-home Caribbean weirdness that I learned about living in the Eastern Caribbean. So.
Wow, when's that coming out, Kia?
Well, it's like I'm rewriting the first draft. That's just, I don't have a publisher. I've got nothing. All I have is just this stuff in notebooks that I'm now trying to bang together.
That's what friends are for. That's what friends are for.
Proposal.
We'll talk you up.
Great subject matter, so I can't wait to see it one day.
Well, we'll see. We'll see if it ever gets out. But anyway, it's to the point where actually I'm not afraid to talk about it. So that's something.
Okay, so I'm supposed to say goodbye. They'll pull us
Yes.
off. Okay, well,
Beautiful.
good guys, folks. It's been great.
All right.
Thanks a lot, y'all. It's been lovely meeting you.
Thank you for
Okay, lovely
inviting
meeting you.
us.
All right, bye-bye.
Thanks for
Yeah.
showing up.